going to do is we're going to look at who our students are. And secondly, we're going to look at some of the supports that are available to our international students during the pandemic. That's where our partner Steve Cameron from Keep Me Safe is going to come in fairly early in the session. And he will be taking questions immediately following his portion of the presentation. He's an external partner and has another commitment at another conference going on this week as well. So in keeping in recognition of his time, we'll ask him his questions up front and then we'll proceed from there. So just a little bit in terms of our international students at Humber. Sorry, I forgot I was going to do a little bit of I was going to try to do Mentimeter, but again, with my challenges with my internet, I'm not going to do that. But I thought if everybody could just quickly type in the chat so that we have an idea of who our audience is, a little bit about what your role is at Humber, and also how often you interact with international students at Humber. So are you interacting with students on a daily basis? Do you interact multiple times a day, once every other week? That type of thing. So just in the chat, your role at Humber and how often you generally interact with international students at Humber. Okay, we've got a program coordinator multiple times a day, another program coordinator every class. We've got workforce specialists, someone who says they never interact with international students daily basis, regularly. Got academic advisors, field coordinators, they interact every day, occasionally. So we've got quite a wide range in terms of how often people interact, everything from not at all to regularly throughout the day. Via email mostly, occasionally, fairly often. Great. Just gives us a sense of who our audience is and what we are speaking to today. So a little bit in terms of our top markets, this is our new student statistics, and this is dating back to fall 2018. So kind of taking a look at the last 3 fall intakes, where our major markets are. I don't think that it's a surprise to anybody that India is our top market internationally. Vietnam has over the last 5 years or so really become far more prominent. And then once we get down into 3rd, 4th, 5th, down through the rest of the top 10, you'll see a mix of countries, Jamaica, China, Nigeria, Ukraine, Philippines, Colombia, South Korea. So a good mix. When we look at our returning students over the same 3-year period, again, India, Vietnam, the top 2, and then we're seeing a little bit there too, Russian Federation. We have Guyana, down in the northern tip of the South Americas. So we've got a wide range of students who are studying with us. In terms of our international student numbers over the past 3 fall intakes, as you can see from 2018 to 2019, we did have a bit of a jump. We are seeing increasing student populations internationally. However, fall 2020, and we'll speak a little bit about reasons why, was absolutely a decline for us, particularly in our new student area. So just 1,811 students, which is more than 1,000 down from the previous fall. And Delise will be talking a little bit to some of the reasons for that in terms of government policies with the pandemic in place. Next thing I wanted to do is ask if you could type into the chat some of the common challenges that you are aware of that international students face, or challenges that you think are probably typical amongst international students. So in the chat, some of the common challenges faced by international students. Yeah, someone said they feel lonely. We've got financial struggles, finding opportunities to build expertise, challenges in navigating the Canadian post-secondary landscape. Definitely it's a different experience for many. Cultural differences, visa-related issues, student visas and work visas, disconnected, finance, language, fitting in, accommodations. I'm not sure, Yanni, if by accommodations you mean in terms of housing or if you mean in terms of, okay. Wasn't sure if you meant housing or academic accommodations, and actually both are relevant. Yeah. So that's absolutely what we're seeing in our area as well. And these are kind of the topics that we're going to be covering throughout the rest of the session. And Bianca, I see, yeah, their expectations versus actual reality, work-related issues. So yeah, these are the topics that we're planning to kind of cover throughout our session today. So with respect to the homesickness, speaking with students, it can be as simple as an inability to find food products that are familiar to them. Missing family and friends, finding a group of students or friends to fit in with here in Canada and at Humber. And I was looking at some of the data from the HSSS survey from last fall. And when we look at fall 2019, 75% of students felt that they knew where to go for counseling or advising when they needed it. When we looked at fall 2020, that number dropped from 75% to 63%. And it's not surprising when we're not on campus, it's just that much more difficult to navigate and to find those supports to deal with that homesickness. Social isolation, again, particularly challenging during this period of COVID and staying at home. Again, 80% of students in fall 2019 felt or agreed or strongly agreed that they had developed friendships in their program. In fall 2020, that dropped down to only 64%. So a 16% drop in feeling that they had some friendships that they had developed. Some other issues in terms of finding housing, price, and safety and availability. So many of our students are trying to find housing from offshore. They, maybe don't know where the school is in location or in comparison to where they're moving. They may, in many cases, get kind of taken for a ride where somebody says, here, we've got a place for you, pay us the money, and they arrive and somebody else already lives in that accommodation. We have many students who are living in very cramped quarters in order to keep costs down, all of those which can cause some challenges safety-wise as well. Sorry. I've kind of got my notes a little bit out of order, but in terms of finding the correct service provider, a lot of students are being bounced around in a virtual environment, and they, we don't always know where they started. It's a challenge because of the back and forth time that it takes when a student's communicating via written form versus standing at our desk and them saying, no, I've already been to that office. So there's a little bit of challenge in terms of finding the right provider in a timely manner. Students, of course, finding challenges in terms of balancing their course and workload. So in fall 2019, there were 50% of our international students were working 6 or more hours per week. In fall 2020, in the pandemic, 55% of our students were working 6 or more hours per week. And of that group, 38% of them were working at least 16 hours a week. So the challenge of balancing that Canadian classroom studies plus that workload. We're also finding that many of our remote students who are still studying from their home countries are working full-time jobs in their home countries and then attending classes overnight. So because they haven't had to leave their home country, they haven't given up employment that they previously had. They're working those jobs, then coming to class at night. So just that balance of trying to keep everything going. Of course, immigration-related concerns are always an issue, and this is one topic Delisa will be speaking to about later on. There's been a lot of changes to the government regulations throughout the period of COVID, and as always, we're challenged by the "my friend said" statements, and we know that students get a lot of their information from their friends, whether that's the appropriate source or not. They do go to their friends often for advice. Financial concerns, obviously. The reporting on the HSSS did change a little bit in terms of how they captured this information in fall 2019 versus fall 2020. So in fall 2019, the statement was basically How concerned are you about your ability to finance college? And at that time, 25% were very concerned, 22% were concerned, and 30% were a little concerned. If you look to fall 2020, it was broken down into ability to pay tuition, ability to pay for housing, and ability to pay for food. But 51% of students were very concerned about their ability to pay tuition. 23% were somewhat concerned, and 15% were a little concerned. So the money issues are becoming more challenging. And we are seeing a larger number of students who are registering for their courses, knowing that they didn't maybe have a way to pay for them, but not sure what their next step could be in terms of that. And, you know, changes at Humber in terms of payment plans and that type of thing are certainly adding to those challenges. Couple more, health and wellness. Obviously, many of our students are working in essential industries and may be in contact with COVID, so that presents a challenge for a number of our international students. We also are aware of many of our international students who are sitting in, living in accommodation with large numbers of other students or other family members, again, having an increased exposure to COVID. And as well, just the general ability to engage in physical activity during the stay at home has been an issue for many students. Time zone challenges, sorry, I'm almost done here. Last one, time zone challenges. So students trying to access classes if they are living outside of the country and trying to access those classes during a Toronto time zone. So, you know, anecdotally, we've spoken to a number of students who perhaps are living in a time zone that's 8 or 10 or 12 hours different, who have essentially started living a night shift in their home country. They sleep during the day, they get up during the night to participate in their classes. So all some of the challenges that our international students are experiencing. I am going to turn it over now to my colleague, Steve Cameron. So as mentioned earlier, Steve Cameron is a partner from Keep Me Safe, which is a mental health and wellness service that Humber has been using since last September. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Amanda, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the Keep Me Safe program. I'm going to share my screen here because I'm going to talk about the program all from the app here, My SSP. So in a moment, you should see my screen up there. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you see my screen? Like Amanda, I don't trust technology. There we go. Oh, lots of thumbs up. Thank you, everyone. All right, so Keep Me Safe. It's a very simple program. It's available to all international students at Humber. It's simple in nature. If a student is struggling, if a student needs to talk to somebody, they can reach out and they can talk to us at Keep Me Safe. What makes our program so special is that students can reach out and they can speak to us in their own language and speak to somebody that understands their culture. So it doesn't matter where the student is from, doesn't even matter where the student is located in the world, they can reach out and they can ask to speak to someone in their language and someone from their culture. We're 24/7, we're 365. We have tens of thousands of counselors spread across the globe. So it doesn't matter what the student needs, whether they need support in the moment or whether they need more ongoing appointment-based support. We have counselors located regionally that can help them with that. So what I'm showing you here is the main gateway to the Keep Me Safe program. I encourage all of you guys to download the free My SSP app. It's in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. It's a simple, small app. Once you download it, you set up your profile. You're going to do exactly what the students do. You plug in your first name, last name, the country that you're from, and then this is where the magic happens. When you put in Humber as the school, you're going to choose which campus, and there's your choices. Humber College International Graduate School, Lakeshore Campus, or North Campus. You just choose which one you want, hit save, and the entire app transforms into the Humber colors. It has in the corner. So it's very easy for the students to connect to this program because they really do feel that it's an extension of Humber. So it's very simple to promote this to students. If students are reaching out to you folks because they're struggling, I mean, Amanda brought up a lot of excellent examples of the struggles and the challenges that our international students are facing. What they normally do is they reach out to people that they know. So that could be some of you guys. And if students are reaching out to you, I want you to know that you can help them navigate to this program. If they're overseas and you don't know how to support them, you don't know what's available in their community, you don't know what answer to give them, get them over to us at Keep Me Safe, get them talking to one of our counselors, because we have the ability to look into various community resources regionally where the student is. So there's so much support that's built into this program that I'm just touching on right now. And this is why it's really important that you guys have the app on your phone. You know how the app functions. You know how easy it is to get these supports. So download that app, navigate through some of the resources as well. We have articles and videos that span categories like health, living away, relationships, and student life. We have a way that you can search for categories. We have keyword clouds there. And what makes this really cool is that you can change the language of the app to work in any of what we call our guaranteed languages. This isn't all the languages that we support. These are just the ones that we guarantee across modalities. So whether it be written articles, recorded videos, or secure clinical chat or phone, counseling, these are the languages that we guarantee all the time, 24/7, 365. So English, Spanish, simplified Chinese, so either Mandarin or Cantonese. And then we also do have Arabic and Korean here in the app. We used to have those as guaranteed languages. We don't anymore, but there's still a lot of articles and videos that are in those languages, so you can still select that language in the app. Now, this isn't to say that we don't have other languages available for students. If they want to reach out and talk to a counselor in a different language, they can absolutely do that. They just need to call in using the phone feature right here. They can call us 24/7, 365, and at any given time, we have about 25 languages available within our Care Access Center. Our goal is to connect the student with a counselor that matches their needs. So if we don't have that language available in the moment, we will offer to connect them to an English-speaking representative, and then we'll queue up some appointment-based support for them in the very near future where they're speaking to someone in their own language and someone that understands their culture. They can also reach out to us by chat, and it's very easy to reach out by chat. You fill in a few details, you hit start chat, and as you can see, I'm next in the queue. I'm going to log out because I don't want to bother the counselors, but it's really simple and really straightforward and quick to get support. If you reach out over the phone, you may only wait a couple of minutes to speak to a counselor in real time. So there's a lot of support built in to this fantastic piece of technology called MySSP. The other thing I'm going to tell you about is we've plugged in some Humber resources here. So we've plugged in the Humber Twitter feed. This is a live Twitter feed, so students can stay up to date with what's going on with respect to social media. And then we've also plugged in some school resources here that are specific to Humber. And again, these are available to the international students that download the app, plug in their profile, select Humber as the school, then boom, all of these school resources exist. So I really want to get across to all you folks in this room with me today that you are a very important factor in the student's mental well-being. Everything that the student's trying to achieve right now is based on a healthy emotional well-being. And if students are struggling, and they will struggle with culture shock, they will struggle with all those different challenges that Amanda pointed out, they're going to reach out to people. And that usually isn't our program. That's usually other people that they're connected to, be it advisors, be it support staff, be it sponsors. That's what international students do. They latch onto someone, they trust that person, and then they start revealing things that they're struggling with. So if that's happening, I want you to feel comfortable and confident to send them over to us. Tell the student in that moment, hey, listen, I know about this great program. I know you're not that into talking to counselors, but I'm telling you, they're really going to help you. Or I know there's this really great article or this really great video that's going to help you navigate this challenge that you're experiencing. You know, maybe you're having a relationship breakdown. Maybe you're having financial struggles. Maybe you're having cultural issues. Maybe you're not sleeping right. Whatever the case is, you can find a resource in this app and you can help them start to get some help. Now, I want to look at some of the questions here that are coming up. Yes, SSP stands for Student Support Program. Very close, not portal, program. I'm also going to throw into the chat here our staff guide. So go ahead and download that staff guide from my shared Google Drive. That's going to give you all sorts of details on the program, and it's going to give you a one-stop shop to go back to, because I know you're not going to remember all of this that I'm telling you. But if you can do one thing right now, download the MySSP app to your smart device, start to navigate through it, set up your profile, be ready to use it when the students need you to use it. Any questions whatsoever, guys?
Steve, there was one question in the chat asking whether or not the app is only usable on a phone.
No, so you can download this app on most smart devices, so whether that be a phone or a tablet. It needs to be an Apple device or an Android device for it to function. But don't worry, if the student can't access the app because they don't have a device that fits those needs, they can go to our website, www.keepmesafe.org, and we have full web access available that gives them access to the entire app online. So all of the content, the secure clinical chat, and many other pieces of content that I haven't touched on yet that are in the app. Great question, though, because we do have a lot of students overseas, especially, that are using older devices that may not be able to download this app.
And Christine, I see that Christine posted a great suggestion, and she was asking if we could put this announcement or an announcement about the app on the Humber Communique. So Steve, the Humber Communique is an email that comes out on a daily basis to Humber staff. So great idea. I'll work with our in-house international marketing team to get that added there. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And if you guys have any suggestions like that, because one of our biggest challenges is getting this message across to students, and not just getting it across to students once, but we need to get this across dozens of times, because international students culturally don't reach out to mental health supports the same way we do here in Canada. So we really need to drive home that message that it's secure, it's confidential, it's free, it's not going to cost you anything. You don't have to wait for a reimbursement. But biggest, it's confidential. Nobody's going to know that you reached out. You guys aren't going to know unless they ask you to help them. Their sponsor's not going to know. Their visa's not going to be impacted. Their school's not going to know. We really need to drive home these points with students so they understand that this is a service we have here in Canada, but it's very different than any service that you would have used in your own home country. Yes, they do input their name. So in the profile itself, I'll just scroll over to that here. They're going to put their first name, their last name, their country of origin, their school, their phone number, and their date of birth and gender. So we ask them for their phone number in case we need to call them. So if they're doing a chat with us and they all of a sudden drop off the chat, we're going to call them just to make sure everything's okay. Or what else happens is international students that are overseas that are wanting to contact our program, they start a chat first and then say, I'm overseas, can you call me, so that I'm not having to pay international charges to contact you guys. So that's why we have the phone number in there. So there is a desktop version. So just to clarify, if you go to www.keepmesafe.org, there is a website link that you can access that gives you the full desktop version of this app. Go ahead, Amanda.
No, I was going to actually read out that question that you just responded to.
Okay, perfect.
And yes, Steve, I know when we first started working together, your team worked with one of the teams, the counseling team here at Humber, correct?
Yes, we did. We met with the counseling team very early on. I want to say her name was Jacqueline Anderson.
Yeah. So this information has been shared, but we're really starting to try to push it more lately. Steve and the international marketing team and I have been working to increase the profile of it. So we've we hosted a session prior to or in our pre-orientation for the summer session. We're hoping to host another session within the next few weeks. We also are posting through our social media, as well as sending out direct emails to students advising them of the availability. And we do have a recording of the first session on our Blackboard site, our International Student Orientation Blackboard site.
So I see many comments, saying that awareness of this program is low. That's why we're in front of you guys right now. You guys are so important because you're the ones that students navigate to. You're the ones that students flock to the most. So if we get you guys knowing about this program, now you can spread the word. Now you can let others know about this, so that in the end, students are getting the help that they need, because it is very difficult to get this message to students in a remote setting. We're depending on existing communication pathways. And let's be honest, students don't read emails all the time, and they don't pay attention to large presentations like this. What they do pay attention to is organic conversations happening in the moment. So if a student brings up a situation, a challenge, that's where I want you guys to feel empowered, that you have a solution that works no matter where the student is, no matter what time of day it is, and no matter what language and culture the student speaks. Any other questions?
I think that looks like it might be it for now, Steve. I was going to say, if anyone has questions that come up after the session today, please do feel free to message myself, Amanda Koski, in the International Center, and I can certainly either provide the response or liaise with Steve to get the answer for you if I don't have it. And the QR code that you can use to scan the the app is in the chat here, as well as the manual that Steve posted, the link to the manual.
Absolutely. I'm here to help. So I know that there might be questions afterwards, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Amanda will get in touch with me, but take a look at that guide. There's a lot of information in that guide. Take a look at our website too. We have some free orientation videos that are about a minute long max, that you can use to refresh, or you can use to share this with others. So if you're talking to some colleagues, talking to some peers out there, and you just want to give them a quick run through of what the program is, send them to some of those program videos that we have. But anyways, I could talk forever about this, so I will exit out. Thank you very much for the time, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your session today.
Thank you so much, Steve.
You got it, Amanda.
Okay, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint again, and we'll continue with the presentation. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So a little bit about some of the activities or events that we've been doing within the International Center. So orientation and college collaboration events. Orientation, obviously, like with the general orientation, has gone fully online. Sorry, so it actually says fall 2020, but it started in summer 2020 fully online. So we've operated four now, fully online orientations. We're doing approximately 4 weeks of Humber hosted activities, including our kind of traditional orientation week, the week before classes start. During that traditional orientation week, the sessions tend to start at 9 o'clock, and that's to accommodate the students who are joining us from other time zones. But other sessions throughout our orientation are offered at different points in the day. So we do events on navigating the navigating Humber's library virtually. We have visits from our health insurance provider. The base has done sessions. We have Service Canada come in to speak to students about how to apply for social insurance numbers, and when relevant to speak about some of the financial support programs during this COVID time that may be available to international students who have sufficient income or work hours within the the previous time period. We also have, as we mentioned, Keep Me Safe, who came in for the first time this May to speak with our students, and then also a workshop series with career services. So historically, we've been doing just one general finding your first job in Canada workshop, but this May we expanded it into a 3-part series. The first one was specifically focusing on job search. The second one was looking at resumes and follow-ups, and the third one was on interviews and dressing for success. And so we're really looking to see what it is that the students are asking for. We promote all of these on our orientation website, which is also linked to the main orientation website. Plus we do social media posts, and we've also been doing emailed newsletters for the last couple of intakes. We've had a really reasonable, we've been quite pleased with the participation range since going online. You know, we're offering at times 30 workshops or so over the 4-week period, and we're getting good turnout for all of them, and definitely enjoying the collaboration that we have with other partners within the college and externally as well. Another activity that started on the break between the fall and winter semesters, and then again the winter to summer break, is a college collaboration event that's been made available to international students. And this is promoted to all of the public colleges in Ontario. And we work together as a team to host, for the May session, there were 34 events in areas like wellness, academic kind of areas, professional growth, social interaction, intercultural experiences, and immigration. So we had 11 colleges out of the 25 who hosted events for the May session. Some of the workshop topics included things like creative journaling, who is Indigenous in the Canadian context. There was an international alumni panel, tips for success in online learning, how to use Microsoft Office 365, etc. And that's been a really invaluable tool because it allows us to offer our students more than what we as a department are able to offer. So we're really piggybacking on other institutions and sharing our knowledge and our experience and our expertise. The other piece that's happening is the customer service team in the International Center also delivers hour-long live web chats. So right now they're alternating between a how to register web chat and a tuition payment process web chat, as well as some just general web chats where students can come on and ask any questions they might have. They're looking to expand that those offerings to other topics as well over the coming months. But those ones, as I said, they're running daily, they're hour-long sessions, and depending on the time of the year, they do that registration and that tuition payment process session as well. The next piece that I wanted to speak to was a little bit about social events. So we, as some of you may know, we generally have a program called Connect. We have not been running Connect throughout the pandemic, and it's simply a matter of staff capacity, human resource capacity. But what we have been doing quite successfully for about, I would say, 8 months, 10 months now, is running Zoom social events. So these events are being run twice weekly. They were initially run by our student advisors, but as the volume of immigration related questions and concerns increased, we have switched over to having our international student ambassadors run the sessions. So they run the sessions, as I mentioned, twice a week. They do them on different topics. So we've been doing mostly activity focused things, Pictionary, charades, trivia. We've also recently started to do coffee chats where they have a general topic such as, you know, life in Canada. We're looking at some of the next topics being things such as what do you like to do on your spare time in a weekend in Canada, or where in Canada can you go to get good bargains or deals, that type of thing. So the idea behind those is not to have a formal structured session, but rather just a topic to help engage students, but really to let the students kind of interact and engage with each other. because what we have been hearing is often at the end of other sessions. So, you know, at the end of we had a recent session with Service Canada, and the students in the chat were desperate to talk to each other. It wasn't the right forum. So we're just trying to bring them together in a more casual avenue. We see anywhere from, you know, small numbers like 5 up to 50 students, depending on the week and the day and where we are in the semester. And we offer those to new students and returning students as well. And again, we advertise those through different means. Academic challenges. I know many of you are PCs or faculty members, so you're well aware of some of these academic challenges that our students face. So timing of classes is always a concern for some of our out-of-country students. Access to technology and the internet. Textbook access, so print versus online, and often there may be copyright issues where, you know, an online version of a textbook may not be available in another country, or a student may not be able to have a textbook mailed to them or couriered to them in their home country. Language. Oh, sorry. Language. Hello? Oh, sorry. Okay. Language barriers, and of course, those, as we know, those exist even when live classes take place. But there is that added challenge through a virtual platform of communicating with people in a second or third language. One piece of feedback that I've been hearing as well is often students will express a concern about the speed of the talker, the speed at which the presenter is speaking. And as I mentioned, that can often be exacerbated when you're in this kind of online forum where you're not getting the body language and that side of communication as well. Teamwork challenges, of course, time zones may be a challenge. And another interesting issue that we did run into this year, of course, was with many of our Chinese students and the students having an inability to access certain sites from China. So what ended up happening is Humber's international department and the IT services worked together to provide VPN access to students from China. So students were eligible to register to request VPN access. Not huge numbers have registered, but we had 35 students in the fall who requested VPN access and an additional 30 in the winter. Plus, we also provide VPN access support to the students who are part of the Ningbo exchange program. And so that's that VPN access is being provided and paid for by Humber to allow the students to access those classes. And I think the next one is my last slide before I turn over to Delise. A little bit in terms of the bursaries and financial aid. Financial concerns have always been quite prevalent for international students. We do have our regular bursaries that we continue to offer. It's a small amount of money, unfortunately. We have about $40,000 per year for the regular international student bursaries, and those are generally initiated by a request from a program coordinator or someone from student advising who reaches out to us and says, I have this student and they're looking for some financial relief. We generally provide those bursaries during final semester. As well, during this period of COVID, we've been working on the COVID emergency relief bursaries since March 2020. Those bursaries have been funded through a variety of means, including Ignite, support our students' donations. We had a fall international tuition increase, so we did a small set aside to cover some bursaries. So those ones have been valued between anywhere from $100 to $1,000. depending on the student's situation. And those have been made available to returning students who are in Canada. And we have specified that it has to be a returning student because part of getting a study permit to come to Canada is showing that you have the means to support yourself. So, you know, a student in first semester who is coming to us for financial aid already, there's a little bit of a disconnect because they have proven to immigration that they have the means to come. So we are limiting it to returning students, and we are limiting it to students who say that they are in Canada. The final piece of bursary that we include as well is our quarantine bursaries. So international students who are arriving in Canada are eligible for financial aid for 3 days of mandatory hotel stay, which Delise will speak to in a few minutes, in addition to an 11-day mandatory longer-term quarantine stay. So they can get up to $750 for the 3-day hotel stay, which was the one that Trudeau's government announced a number of months back, and they can get up to an additional $750 for the additional 11 days of quarantine stay. And the bursaries do have to go to students who are staying in commercial accommodations, so they need to have a bill or a receipt. It can be a hotel, it can be an Airbnb, but it does have to be something that is a commercial expense. And since March 2020, we've awarded over $2.4 million to international students in the COVID emergency relief bursaries and the quarantine bursaries. We are looking to make some changes to the quarantine bursaries for the fall semester, but we don't have final decisions on that yet. And one other little piece that I wanted to mention is health insurance, which kind of doesn't in some ways seem to fit with bursaries and financial aid. However, for the health insurance piece, we are allowing out-of-country international students to opt out. So it does provide a bit of a financial relief from a small piece of their fees. So students are notified anywhere from 3 to 4 times prior to the start of the semester that there's a form for them to fill out, and they identify whether they're in the province, whether they're outside of the province but in Canada, if they're in their home country or in a third-party country. And based on that, students who are in their home countries are eligible to receive a refund of their health insurance each semester. So I'm going to turn over to Delise now.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our workshop. I'm going to basically do the second half, and contrary to what Amanda just said about the pace of a speaker, I'm going to probably be speaking fast because I'm aware of our time frame that we have here, and there is quite a bit of information, and I checked out who our participants are over the course of the last year. I've been dealing with some of you on, specifically immigration or some of the academic issues that our international students are facing. So please bear with me. So what we have been doing for the past year, and it's hard to believe that we've been working remotely since last March, but we continue to work with our inform international students about immigration issues. So we've been continuing a regular offering of the workshops such as the co-op work permit, the study permit extension, and the post-graduation work permit workshops. We've been using actually Microsoft Teams Live. So for each of these sessions, you might find that we could have several hundred students participating in these particular workshops that we've been offering steadily through the course of the year. And they're also recorded. So if they go to learn.humber.ca, if they miss one of these workshops because either they're in class or the time frame that they're in, they can actually just go to the Blackboard site and check out that particular recording. We're constantly doing update workshops because in this past year, as you probably would assume, there's been a lot of changes with immigration. So anytime that there's a major update from immigration, we're scheduling a workshop. And again, as Amanda has indicated, through email, through our social media sites, we're informing students of their opportunity to sit in on some of these sessions. And again, we're also recording those so that we can make sure that students are aware of any particular changes. We've also recently, some of you I know are aware that the government announced a new plan, how they can increase permanent residence to Canada. And one of those streams was particular to the international student graduate. So we also did workshops on those pathway to permanent residency or PR streams. The problem that you probably have faced is a number, especially for the program coordinators or faculty that might be on this line, were students coming to you asking to be graduated early because it was important for them to have their final transcript and their confirmation of graduation so that they could get into that particular pool. Because as of May 5th, that's when the government was opening these particular streams. There was 40,000 spots for international students graduate going back to the 2017 graduation. So we did address that based on the information that we had from the government. And actually the government was very closed-mouthed as to what information they gave us until the stream actually opened. So yes, so if you go to the next slide, Amanda. Okay, so I'd like to go back to the basics. What is or who is an international student? International student is actually a temporary resident to Canada who's been granted permission to come here to study. So they're obligated to maintain full-time student status, and they must be actively pursuing their studies. So that's some of the students I know have come to you over the past year potentially, and some of this might be related to financial struggles, not just here if they're here in Canada, but also in their home countries because of maybe collapse of economies, is what if I step out for a semester? So this is something that the international student must be aware of, but they do have certain obligations. The immigration might be understanding to a certain extent, but as Amanda just said, they had to prove that there was funds available for them to come and study, but we're all aware that things have come up unexpectedly. So students always need to have a valid study permit. Because if they don't, then they have to stop their studies. And unfortunately, we do have students that have, well, my friend told me because let's say my classes end on April 30th, it's okay if my study permit expires on April 29th, I have no problems moving forward. Well, unfortunately, if they had one more exam left to do on April 30th, they weren't eligible to do that particular exam because they're now out of study. You might also have some students coming to you, and actually just yesterday, I responded to somebody from one of the placement advisors with a student that unfortunately for academic reasons, for misconduct, has to extend their studies into the summer sessions. And they're saying that it's going to impact them on their post-graduation work permit. We have no control over that. If a student, unfortunately, is behind in their studies, then all they can do is write letters of explanations. So they have to be full-time throughout their studies. The only time that they could be part-time is in their very last semester. There was one exception to this last year, is for students, particularly in health sciences and maybe applied tech, where they're or the former hospitality related industries where they were out and they had to do labs, and the government in that case allowed them some exceptions because classes were either canceled or moved forward to another semester. After the students graduate, they have the opportunity to apply for a post-grad work permit. Humber or the advising team, we cannot guarantee anybody, especially somebody that might have some gaps in their studies, that post-graduation work permit. So this is one reason why you might find that students pressure you, especially if you're faculty or PCs, in order to make sure that they have a passing grade, because they don't want to take that chance on their opportunity to work for potentially up to 3 years after they graduate. This past year, and unfortunately I don't have any statistics, it seems unfortunately we have a number of students who have been challenged academically and required to withdraw. And a lot of times when the students have been required to withdraw, they approach us on the advising team and saying that we have a drop quote unquote, drop in a program, and what should we do? Well, that drop can have a major impact on their studies, but just like any other student, whether or not they be domestic, if they're required to withdraw, then that also means they have to sit out for the 8 months before they have the ability to return to their classes. They cannot work during that time because they are not a student. So I think sometimes this past year, one of the reasons we're seeing students maybe with the lower grades, it might be because the financial burden that they're facing during a pandemic and trying to find work. But unfortunately, in the long run, it is inhibiting sometimes their potential to move forward and get that post-graduation work permit. We, as what we call a designated learning institution, that's what DLI stands for, twice a year we're required to submit a report to immigration, not just immigration, but also to the ministry as to where our students stand. Are they full-time? Are they part-time? Have they been academically suspended? Are they on a scheduled break? Scheduled break in terms of for immigration purposes means the student needs to be full-time before that break and full-time after that break. Sometimes students take a break without informing the college, not realizing, especially maybe a student, let's say in applied tech, not realizing that maybe semester 3 is only offered in the September semester. And because they listen to their friends, maybe in a different program, decide to take the break then, making them sit out for another year. So if you have students coming to you asking maybe about a break and how it might affect their international status, we encourage you to reach out to one of the members of the advising team, and then we can actually give you some suggestions as to how that might impact a student's stay here in Canada and ultimately their ability to get their post-graduation work permit. So the next slide is the impact of COVID. One of the things that we've had is, oh, and I see that you've changed the slide on me, is we've had longer processing times within Canada and overseas due to the closures of offices. And we've had, okay.
I didn't make any changes, Delise, honest.
Okay. It's the formatting, I guess. Is delay of the supplemental requirements. So prior to COVID, a number of you, especially in the placement areas, were dealing with students in their co-op work permits. And one of the things that we were noticing is the processing time, not just of the co-op work permits, but also the study permits, were often well over 100 days. And one thing that I just like to throw out there, that when a student receives a letter of acceptance from Humber, if they're in a program that has a mandatory co-op placement, the third page of their acceptance letter is actually their co-op letter, and students are encouraged when they apply for that study permit to also apply for their co-op work permit at the same time. So when they reach the port of entry, that they are granted both their study permit and their co-op work permit, simultaneously. Unfortunately, a number of students are working with agents or friends, or family members who don't understand that. So it's until they reach Canada that suddenly they need to apply for that co-op work permit. So that's one of the reasons we had a number of students come fall of 2019 that were faced with the fact that they were supposed to be out in placements in winter of 2020, not having co-op work permits, and also the government has also instilled new requirements for biometrics. So that was a significant delay of information. So one of the things with students that are overseas now is that we have delays in biometrics, medical exams, police checks. The issuance of TRV stands for temporary residence visas. In terms of a number of the offices have closed just because of the COVID. Or if they are open, they have very minimal staff. So we were looking at, for example, some countries taking up to 34 weeks to process a study permit application. So this is very problematic for our students wanting to study and start their studies and questioning whether they should start without having a proper study permit or authorization, what we call a letter of introduction, which converts it into a study permit at the border. We cannot predict immigration implications for the 21-22 academic year. We received no forewarning of the changes. So I know we've had some departments reaching out to us and say, what happens for the fall 2021 semester, because government has responded to what's going to happen as of December 31st, but we don't know how that's going to impact our winter 2020-22 session in terms of students being able to come here. So if you can go to the next slide.
Sorry, I jumped too quickly.
Yeah, okay.
There.
Okay, so I just talked about the extensive processing times for study permits and co-op work permits. So the other thing is the biometrics. I'm showing these little arrows in terms of the timeframes that we were working with immigration. We found that over the course of the last year, we get updates from immigration, no prior notice. There's been a number of changes, some minor, some major. So what I'm going to do is walk you through some of the more significant changes and how it impacts our students and students particular in your programs. So biometrics were required at one time. So that delayed processing because student has to pay an additional fee. They had to go to like a Service Canada when they were open to have the biometrics done. So there was a lot of backlog with Service Canada, especially when they closed their office. So next slide. So in March 2020, the world sort of as we knew it came to an end. So we shifted from basically, because I know that my last day on campus was March 16th last year, is we shifted from in-person to online delivery method. And that also meant that the closure of immigration offices in and outside Canada. So that had a major impact. Think about, we have hundreds of thousands of applications out there for immigration, not just for Humber, but right across Canada. And suddenly these offices closed and everybody's scrambling, just as we were in Humber. How do we deal with going from dealing with clients, or in our case, students, in an in-person format to doing it online? So all of a sudden, how is this going to impact international students and their studies? Because up until COVID, students couldn't engage in online studies, okay? And suddenly they had to go to all their classes were online. And then especially for those academic faculties that were dealing with students that had labs, how do we adjust to this? So finally, immigration realized is we couldn't have classes happening. So they temporarily granted the opportunities for students to study online and would not be penalized for their postgrad work permit. So they approved that. So that was a weight lifted off the shoulders of a number of students. In last summer, we found at Humber that most programs had labs. They were suspended to either the fall of 2020 and in some cases to the winter of 2021. In this case, immigration was aware and tried to accommodate students in this particular scenario and say that they would not be penalized if they were forced, because of their program delivery format, to be part-time or their semester deferred. So again, that did help some students, but you might also have some students coming to you because suddenly they're saying is they need to extend their study permits because, when they were originally written, we didn't know that we were going into a pandemic and classes would be canceled. So if we can go to, okay, so essential service workers. So last summer, students who normally would only have the opportunity to work 20 hours off campus, that is the authority based on their study permit, were if they were deemed to be an essential service, they were allowed to work full-time hours. So what did this mean for some of your students? It meant that some of them might, because of financial reasons, be, going from maybe working 20 hours to doubling that to working 40 hours. So, where was the concentration on their studies, or was it trying to, help them with their financial situation? But, some students say, well, okay, they would email and say, I'm an essential service worker. But it wasn't for the student to deem whether or not they were the essential service worker. The government came out with a policy and there was precise instructions. So if the student later on was ever challenged for working full-time rather than those 20 hours, it was their employer that had to deem that they were essential worker. And there was actually a whole schedule of who was deemed essential worker. Obviously, if you were in healthcare, you were essential worker, maybe stocking shelves or whatever, but it was the employer's responsibility, not Humber, to decide whether or not they were in a essential worker or not. Then we moved into what we call a two-stage study permit assessment. So we had students, as I said a few minutes ago, visa offices were being closed overseas. How are we going to get those students to Canada and allow them to study? So the government came up with a two-stage process. So we have a student submits their application for a study permit, and there was what we call approval in principle. So for the first stage is the student had to demonstrate some of the basics of the normal study permit, that they had the letter of acceptance, they had the appropriate fees, and they passed certain tests, in order to come to Canada. If that was sufficient, then they would be approved in principle to start their studies. Then, because of some of the other aspects, like the biometrics, the medical, police checks, were going to take much longer, that would go into the second stage. So suddenly we went from students that had full approval to start studies to students that had partial approval to start their studies. But the students were saying that government assured them that, as long as they applied and they could prove to Humber that they had applied for their study permit, Humber allowed them to study. We have a process where students have to upload any communication from immigration. So as long as they showed us that they had a letter of submission applying for the study permit, we actually allowed them to register for their classes. So the students that were inside Canada with valid study permit suddenly last spring became exempt from having the biometrics because of Service Canada closures. There's no way that they could go forward with that particular. So for a number of your students, especially those ones that were waiting for co-op work permits, this was a delay. So this also helped because they no longer needed to worry about their biometrics. So then the next stage is we had, and I know a number of people that are on this call were constantly reaching out to us in frantic mode, is what do I do with all these students? Because they were in a holding pattern, waiting for their biometrics to be done. Service Canada offices were closed. They applied, they were supposed to be out in, let's say, last January. We came to the end of the winter semester. We're now into the summer semester. How are these students ever going to graduate because they do have this mandatory placement? So the government finally, came up with a temporary solution. So in lieu of a student having a co-op work permit, so if a student is currently in Canada, they do need to have a co-op work permit in order to do that internship or placement. So, but if a student had on their study permit were authorized to work off campus, then in lieu of that outstanding co-op work permit, students were allowed to take the option, either use their study permit authorization and take 20 hours and do that to fulfill their internship, or they're going to have to wait for it. But anybody that was using this particular option had to also be able to prove that they had already applied for the co-op work permit. So it just wasn't a total switch. They had to demonstrate to the government that they actually had approved for the co-op work permit, or actually to Humber that they had approved for the co-op work permit, and then they could use their study permit. But there was a slight twist to that. Okay, because in order to work off campus, students still had to meet their eligibility requirements, which meant that they couldn't have dropped to part-time any time in their studies unless it was their very last semester. So we, to help facilitate and work with the academic faculties, is one of our advising team. Sophie Yang she's the person that is our go-to person for this, could work with the faculties to say, okay, we have to look at that student's academic record progression to see that they are actually still eligible to work off campus. In that case, they can work towards the co-op work permit. So then the next criteria for a lot of students is what's going to happen to my postgrad work permit eligibility. So the government came up with a formula that, again, that if you were in studies as of March 2020, and then if you start your studies between summer 2020 to fall 2021, you will not be penalized if you are outside Canada and your classes are remote. So you're still eligible for the postgrad work permit. There's other pieces to it, but I won't go into more depth because I'm looking at the time frame here. So only then the next piece that influenced our students is who could come to Canada. So only students with a letter of introduction, which means that they've been fully approved to study, or students holding a study permit can travel to Canada. And the reason for travel must be essential. So it can't be somebody that's on a scheduled break and say, well, I want to return to Canada. Sometimes there's a fluke, they might get in, but there's a lot of opportunities that they will be turned away. And another, for some of those students that maybe gone home, let's say last fall in 2020, because they want to be with their family during the pandemic, is suddenly they were faced with the possibility they couldn't, even though they had a valid study permit, couldn't get back into Canada because the government then made an additional requirement is only students that were studying at a designated learning institution that was on an approved COVID attestation list were allowed to re-enter Canada. So we were in probably about the third draw. Humber ended up probably about the third draw of that. So suddenly any students that are Humber students that want to come back with those study permits were able to return to Canada. And then, as most of you are aware, that more recently the direct flights from India and Pakistan were suspended. And so that has a significant impact for students, especially in a hybrid program. So those of you that work with applied tech students, I know some of those students were supposed to be back in between semesters to get caught up on their labs. So how does this play out when if their direct flight was canceled? A number of these students had flights all arranged and suddenly they were canceled. And you probably also heard that those flights, that ban has also been, flight ban has been continued through to June 21st. So the next piece, more recent, is the government came out with a statement, about 3 weeks ago saying that any student that had a complete permit application that was received by their office by May 15th would receive a decision by August 6th for the fall 21 term. So in order, it's basically saying that if you applied, you had it fully complete, that means all your financials, that means your police check, everything else, then you should receive a decision, which also be helpful also for you, especially the faculties that might be looking at numbers, or if your placement, how are you placing some of these students? Is students will get that decision whether or not they have been granted the study permit to come to Canada or not. So if we can go to the next slide, Amanda. Okay, so pathways to permanent residency. So the streams that the government came out recently is the 40,000 spots that were available to international student graduates. So they had to have earned that credential from January 2017 to the present. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago about how a lot of students were probably putting pressure on you, not just you, but also us, to try and get them graduated. Even those are some students that even a semester left to study, they were just so anxious to get into this particular stream. And the stream closed on May 6th. It was open on May 5th, and within 24 hours, those 40,000 spots were taken. Whether or not those were legitimate applications, we don't know. It's up to the government to determine. So unfortunately, this worked against the students that were in graduating in winter 2021 because it was impossible for them to have not only the graduation documents, but the IELTS test and some of the other documents that were required. There was also a couple supplementary streams, and this might apply to, our health care students that had already graduated and had some work experience, or even some of our students that might have been in some of our essential services or trades, where you'll see on the screen there's 20,000 spots for health-related workers or 30,000 spots for essential occupations that were available. And this opportunity to apply for these positions was open till next November 5th. We haven't monitored whether or not these other 20,000 or 30,000 spots are full, but the international ones are definitely filled. So the travel ban and the impact that it has on our students. So our perception that we get from their students is they see all these travel restrictions, having to be on a DLI list, having to only come for essential services. Students that, let's say, have graduated recently that decide to return to their home country, wanted to come back to Canada, but they can't. So some of them perceive it is right now Canada is closed to them, but who can actually enter? So if you have a study permit or you have what we call the letter of introduction, you're welcome to come, assuming that you're coming just in time to start your classes. So we've had a lot of our messaging that we get from students or for students coming for fall 2021 who are saying that they want to arrive next week. And we're having to turn around and say, no, that's impossible for you to arrive because you're going to come to the border and be turned away. So it's going to be very expensive for you because right now there's no reason for you to be in Canada. You need to only come to allow for sufficient time to quarantine. There is, if you remember last month, there was a statement made by the provincial government that's saying that we should close our borders to international students. That was not the case. There was miscommunication, pardon me. Students who also want to come, they must also have a pre-entry COVID test. So within 72 hours, of their departure, they need to have a COVID test. And if anybody is flying through a third-party country, they also must have another COVID test, negative COVID test, before they can leave that third-party country to come on to Canada. The government has come up with, this is CBSA, come up what we call ArriveCAN form. So it's mandatory that not just students, but anybody arriving in Canada completes this form. And then they must also, something happened to that screen there. Okay, thank you. Is also have to prove that the students must prove they have sufficient funds in order to survive without working. Because you also have to remember is the students, especially first semester students, have supposedly demonstrated to the government that they had sufficient funds to live on. So we want students that were able to come and not having to rely on working because they also have to quarantine once they get here. It's not like they can get off the plane and start working at Walmart or wherever. They need to also have those funds. And again, there's no guarantee that they will get a job just because there's so many workplaces that are laying off at this particular time during the pandemic. So who might be turned away? So if you have a student, let's say, that's taking the summer break, they might be turned away because they're not essential for coming to Canada. They're not studying. Students who graduated and do not have a post-grad work permit. So a number of students after they graduated returned home and said, well, okay, maybe I'll apply from overseas, not realizing that in order to return, they not only have to have that post-grad work permit, but they also need to have a job, a firm job offer. New students arriving early. No, so if anybody reaches out to you and, please direct them to our office. They need to come in, let's say for fall, they need to be coming in August. Okay, just allowing sufficient time if quarantine's still a requirement to quarantine and look for a place to live. And then if they're coming, a number of our students, and we find this over the last few years, increasing number of our students have partners and spouses and children. And we know of cases where the spouse has come with the student and the spouse has been turned away. Okay, so that is a risk that some families are taking. And obviously they want to keep the whole family unit together, but there is no guarantee that the border services will allow all family members to come in. And again, as we said, the direct flights from India and Pakistan have been influenced. So next, okay, so how have we been advising through the pandemic and what technology? So all of you are going to recognize these different logos. So obviously we've been using Teams, like what we're using right now. And Teams in particular is how we're conducting our workshops. We're using Teams Live. So I believe you can have over 1,000 individuals on a workshop. So that is very helpful for us because we find that a number of our workshops are heavily attended. In fall 20, we had what we call in-person walk-ins. So physically, the advising team, we were not on campus. So if a student went to the Lakeshore or the North Campus, our customer service team would, there was a laptop in our boardrooms there. And the customer service would reach out to the advising team and we would hook up with that particular student and we can have this conversation because again, there was limitations of who could be on campus. Ironically, a number of students that came in and availed themselves of that service were students that technically shouldn't have been on campus, ones that we have already been dealing with through Outlook. So Microsoft Outlook has been our go-to. We have, just like everybody else on this call, we've had hundreds. We've all seen an increase in the number of emails. Zoom is another way that we also connect with students, especially if they want a one-on-one session with advising. So sometimes we'll do it with Zoom or we'll do it with Teams. And another one is for cell phones. And you can appreciate that our students are international. So and could be not just here in Canada or anywhere in Canada, because a number of our students in Canada are not in Ontario, they're in BC or another province. So with cell phone, it's only limited to local clubs. I know personally I cannot get Cisco Jabber to work, at home for me. So it means relying on one of the other online portals. So you can go to the next slide, Amanda. And working with outside partners. So we work with immigration in fall 2020. We did it twice, and again in winter of this year. We had Canada outreach officer do a session for students for pathways to PR. We're not talking about the new stream. We're just talking about how students that are interested in getting their permanent residency offering these sessions to them. More Care is our normal insurance provider. So they have been engaged with us through our orientation session, offering workshops. Typically twice a semester, they will do a workshop on what students are covered for. And that's been a total nightmare because normally we're not worrying about students being outside Ontario. I know I see a couple people that came on this call that I know have students that might be doing their placements outside the province, but there's been a major change where students are almost temporarily for a whole year outside the province, because they're only insured, fully insured, if they are in the province of Ontario. This, as Amanda said earlier, that if a student indicates that they're studying in their home country, then they're not eligible for the insurance. So in that case, they were eligible to opt out. We've been working with North York Community House, which is partners with Koski, and I know a number of people here on that. Can you go back to the previous slide, Amanda? Okay. Thank you. Is with Koski, and so they've done a number of workshops with us. Service Canada, because students that want to work, they need a social insurance number. So we've been working with Service Canada in helping those students get the social insurance numbers. Especially for the people on this call that are in placement, Service Canada is basically how do these students get those social insurance numbers? So the option for them is an online application. So if you have students, and we know most of our placements are unpaid placements, but you might have that occasional student that has a paid one. And so if you have a student that you're working with, make sure that they're applying well in advance if they don't have a social insurance number, because they're going to have to allow for that student to try and get that, probably take almost up to about 8 weeks for them to get that social insurance number. So just as a heads up. So if you go to the next slide, Amanda. So for North York Community House, so some of the sessions they've been working with us on is on worker rights and employers' expectations, financial literacy, how to identify frauds and scams, and that's major for international students. Even those of us that are used to dealing with some of these scam calls or emails. It's hard, especially for international students that have, a lot of money invested. And I know of some, especially even before the pandemic, and they're getting more challenging to determine if it's a scam or it's legitimate. So it's important that we get this message out to the students, is how to identify what is a fraud and what's a scam, and what are your recourse after if you do get caught up with that. Talking about tax and government benefits, because that was one of the things for international students when the government came out last year with CERP, and how, and it didn't apply, to international students. So there was a lot of questions around that, about benefits during a pandemic and trying to get funds. And they also did one-on-one tax sessions and how to file income tax. So we can go to the next slide. So throughout the year, we've been doing a number of collaborations. So with the academic advising team, before the semester starts, they have a series of pre-arrival advising sessions for international students. So they come up with a schedule, and then amongst the 5 ISAs or international student advisors, we sign up. So we're there if there's any questions that do come up relating to international specific issues. We're there to support that academic advisor and helping to answer any questions. We've also been, throughout the pandemic, available for classroom visits and/or meetings with Humber staff or faculty. And then another area that we work with closely and very closely is the registrar's office. And as I said a few minutes ago, we were talking about students wanting to expedite their graduation documents. Normally we could only expedite or graduation documents if a student has a job offer. But we had a number of students that were trying to get into that 40,000 international grad stream. So we work with students. So we couldn't do it for that unless the student had a legitimate job offer. So the student would send the job offer to us. We would look at it, and then we would create the SAF, and there's a whole series of steps to go through and put a request. And by expediting graduation documents, it means not only getting the student graduated, but also getting their confirmation. Once they're graduated, then they will see their confirmation of graduation letter. But another key piece is that they need their final transcript. And because of, we have the registration office staff only going on campus a couple times a week for minimal hours. We're asking, putting more pressure on the RO, and I'm sure they must hate it every time they see an email from us, asking them to scan and email that student's transcript, because their final transcript is the other proof. It actually lists a credential was awarded, and that is what immigration is looking for, is the transcript saying a credential was awarded plus the confirmation of graduation document. And the next slide, please. So Blackboard, so I mentioned this earlier. So we have an orientation course, and just like all the workshops that we've been offering throughout the last year, we upload those to that Blackboard site. So there's other general information, as you can see, for transportation, setting up bank accounts, accommodation, setting up your phone, getting the SIN number. But all they have to do, a student has to do, and we do advertise this to students, is just go to learn.humber.ca, and then they're able to find this information, because students being in different time zones, or, obviously it's supposed to be in class, they need to still have have this information available to them, so they can avail themselves through the Blackboard site. And next slide. So how do students reach out to us? So the best way for them to reach out is to use our contact form. So it's just international.humber.ca/contact.html. So there's a whole series of reasons why, and it's not just for the international advising team. There's questions there for opportunity for agents, there's opportunity for prospective students, our customer service, our admissions team, recruitment, what have you. So, and when a student comes, there's different boxes that they can tick off. And I know it's hard to see, so if they have questions on study permits or work permits, they can tick that off. If they have other immigration related questions, they have, a lot of times students will come to us about, I'm in a drop situation, quote unquote, means they've been required to withdraw. They might ask questions about program changes, health insurance, anything that they think that they're not quite sure where. They know that either we handle it or they're not quite sure where to go to. They will come in and they will fill in one of these boxes. And it's sort of preferable to, maybe sending the email to us directly, because, again, we're just like every other Humber employee, we're still also taking our vacation time and what have you. So this means that continually, daily, staff can go in and we can look at these particular questions. One of the things is, and we apologize for this, but you have to appreciate that every day there could be hundreds, especially when we come to certain times of the year where it's just before startup. Right now, over the last month, we've been seeing a lot of responding to a lot of questions, dealing with fall 2021. When it came closer to the end of the semester, there was a lot of students about graduation. What do I do if I'm part-time and I need to extend my study permit? It also fluctuates with all the different activities that are academic related, and just in general, how do I bring my family here, whatever. So there could be hundreds of questions in it, so we have to bear with us. So sometimes students will reach out to us, personally, which is okay. But, we're in there constantly turning it around. And sometimes it might take a while to get to the international advising team, because maybe the student has ticked off another box and it went to either our admissions team or our recruiting team. And then once they discover it's for the wrong team within international, then they would forward it on. So if you have students, saying, well, we haven't gotten back to the student because maybe they sent us a request, at, 9 a.m. and it's now 5 p.m. and we haven't responded, they have to give us much longer. Certain times it might take up to a week before they can get a response. But that's the same thing with all of you out there are dealing with the email, dealing with some of the expectations in our turnaround time. Next slide, please. And so just here's a list of the advising team. So we won't dwell on this because I know we're well over our time frame. And then here, the email address for Amanda and myself, if you have any questions. I apologize for having to race through it, but we, as you noticed, we had a lot of content that we were trying to go through, and especially with the immigration, and I know it pertains to a number of you out there. There's been so many changes, and usually we only find out about these changes at the same time that everybody else finds out. Sometimes I swear the students find out about it before we do. But again, Purna, I'm not sure. I know we've gone well over our time, so I'm not sure if there's any questions that we can take.
I mean, I will leave it up to you if you have some time.
Yes, and thank you everybody for your patience with us as we went over time. The nice thing is that this whole session's recorded, so for anyone who had to leave early or who has to leave now, there is a recording available.
So if anybody does have a question, we can take it. Yeah.
I'm seeing that Irene has her hand up.
Sorry, I was muted, Delise. I had one question that came up in the chat, and that was whether or not the requirement or the ability to do 50% of on-campus classes and 50% of online from their home country still stands, or the rules have changed since then.
Okay, good question. It has changed. Right now, anybody that had classes in progress in March 2020, and also either started in summer 2020 or fall 2021, they can do 100% of their classes online. So this doesn't pertain to anybody in Canada. Anybody in Canada, they're good, but we're talking primarily with those students that are still in their home country. This is in effect until December 31st, 2021. And at that point, we can't predict what's going to happen with the government. They're just saying, I think a lot depends on the pandemic. I know it was interesting that they came out with the announcement that they're trying to push through study permits, if students had complete applications and submitted by May 15th. So I know the emphasis is probably on trying to get as many students to Canada as possible. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be some restrictions in the winter of 2020 with some online, but that's going to be all on which countries in their third, fourth, potentially fifth wave of the pandemic, and also travel restrictions. So right now you can do a whole course. So we had, for example, some of our students might be in marketing management or supply chain. They're 8-month programs. They can do 100% of their studies online. Initially at the pandemic, it was limited to how much you can do, but now it's 100% that they can do online up until December 31st, 2021.
That was the only question I had noticed,
Okay.
Elise, through that session.
And again, apologize for just throwing a lot of information at you, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us individually if you do have further questions.
Thank you, Delise. Thank you, Amanda. That's a great presentation. A lot of tips and resources, to help us with assisting international students as we see them every day. And thank you for taking time to come and, out of your busy time to help present this, research topic. Thank you once again. And thank you to all the participants. Just before you head out, if you can just complete the survey, that would be great. And tomorrow there are no sessions scheduled. Our second keynote is on Friday, scheduled for 10:30 a.m. So no registration is required. I'm just going to post the links and everything here. Thank you.